Hi and welcome to my class. Today we're doing a summary on all the grade 10 measurement. Now, when we start, we need to know all the different shapes. The first two that we are going to cover is the rectangular prism and the square base prism. Now, the prisms, the areas are simply rectangles or squares. You already know that the area of a rectangle or square is simply length times breadth. When we are discussing surface area, what we want is, we want to discuss every area that there is. So if we look at this picture, we will know that there are 6 surfaces that we are discussing. All we have to decide is, what is the length or the breadth? Now, based on this summary, what we're going to do is, we're going to do each one slowly. Let's take a rectangle. If you look, we know that there are 6 sides. But when you look at the sides, you will see that 2 are always the same. If you take this one, is equal to this one. If you take this one, it is equal to this one. And if you take this one, then it is equal to this one. Since we have 2 of the same sides, what we can say the area for a rectangular prism and a square base prism is going to be, it's going to be 2a times b, and then it's going to be 2 plus 2b times c, and then I'm going to say plus 2a times c. Right, so let's do an example. If I wanted the surface area of the following shape, I know that the surface area means I have to take in consideration every area. So if I take this pink, it's going to be 2 length times breadth, which is equal to 15 times 10, plus 2 again length times breadth, which is 10 times 12. So which side I'm doing is this one and this one. Then I still have the top. What is the measurement for the top? I know it is going to be 15 on this side, and I know it's going to be 12 on this side, because they are rectangles and opposite sides of a rectangle are equal. So it will be plus 2 15 times 12. So it is 2 into 15 times 12. Now after you've calculated that, all you need to do is use a calculator and get an answer, which is equal to 900. Since we are doing area, we know it's going to be units squared. If you're going to do the surface area of a square based prism, now it's exactly the same. The only difference is, if I give you that this is 10, we know that all the other sides are also going to be 10. Why? Because it is a square and all 4 sides are equal. But if you take, I'm going to have 10 times 10, which means that I now have done the blue, plus 2, and will be 10 times 15. I've now done this side and the other side. Then I'm going to do the top. Now look at the top and the bottom. It is also going to be 2 into 10 times 15. Why? Because all 4 sides are equal. But what you must remember is, as long as you consider all the sides, you are going to cover the correct work. Then you can press it into your calculator, which is equal to 800 units squared. So if you look at the surface area of a rectangular prism and a square base prism, they are the same. Now how do we calculate volume? Volume is always the area of the base times the perpendicular height. Now if you look at this base, it's going to be 15 times 12, and the height is 10. Now look, 15 times 12 is exactly the area of the base. So it is length times breadth times height, which will give me 1800 units. If we're doing the volume of a square base prism, it will be the same thing. Volume is equal to length times breadth times height, which is going to equal to 10 times 15 times 10, which is equal to 1500 units cubed. Now looking at a summary, what do we have? We know that the surface area of a rectangle is equal to 2 times the one side, 2 times the other side, and 2 times the third side. And the volume is length times breadth times height, which in this case would be A times B times C. And exactly the same thing works for a square-based prism. Now let's go to a rectangular-based. If you look at the rectangular-based prism, what you would notice is that there are 5 sides. Now why do we call it a rectangular-based prism? Because the base is determined on the 2 sides that are parallel to each other. And you can clearly see that this here is parallel to the bottom, and this one here is parallel to this, or this here is parallel to this. None of these rectangles are parallel to each other. In fact, they are just touching each other all around. So how do we know it's a triangular base prism? Because the bases are parallel to each other. Now to calculate the surface area means we're going to take the area of the 2 triangles. Now most of the time they will give you the 90 degree on the drawing. So if I was here and the 90 degree was there, right, how would we calculate the surface area? First you have to get the area of the triangle. You know the area of a triangle is equal to a half base times height. So in this case it would be a half times the base. Remember, the base and the height have to touch the 90 degree. So in this case it would have to be 8 and 6. So it would have been half times 8 times 6. But how many triangles are there? Look how many triangles there are, and they are exactly the same. So the surface area of the triangular prism is going to be 2 times half base times height, which is the same as just saying base times height, right? So if I was saying the triangle here, I would have said half times 8 times 6, but then there are 2 of them, so I would times it by 2, which ends up giving me simply 8 times 6. Now considering the other sides, I have 1 rectangle, 2 rectangles, 3 rectangles. But what are their dimensions? Let's take the first one. This one here is going to be 8 times 15. So we know it's going to be length times breadth, which is equal to 8 times 15. But they are all not the same. The second one is now also the 15, but it is linked to the 6. So it's going to be 15 times 6. Look again, it is the concept of length times breadth because it is a rectangle. Then we're doing the last one, which is at the bottom, the base, which is again 10 times 15. So again it is length times breadth. What you have to realize is that every one of these lengths are different. They are based on the sides of the triangle. So when you are doing surface area, you must look at each side separately. If the triangle is a scalene triangle, meaning that all 3 sides are different, then every length will be different. If it's a different triangle, you have to have 3 different lengths. Now, after that, you can use your calculator, which is equal to 408 units squared. Now, if you're looking at the summary, what does it say? It is saying that the surface area is half base times height, but 2 of it. Why 2? Because there are 2 triangles. Then it is A times C, side 1 of the triangle, times D times C, side 2 of the triangle, then times B times C, side 3 of the triangle. Now let's go to the volume. When we were doing the volume of the prisms, the square and the rectangular, I told you it is the area of the base times the height. And that is exactly the same way that it will work for a triangular base prism. Now what is the area of the triangle? the area of the triangle is half base times height, working with the triangle. And then what is the distance that are joining the two triangles? That is this height. Can you see? So when we're working with the volume of a triangular base prism, it is half base times height, meaning the area of this triangle, and then times C, which is basically the length that is joining the two triangles. So in this case it would be half, and the area of our triangle was 6 times 8, so it was half 6 times 8, half base times height, times what is the height joining the two triangles? 15. So the volume is equal to 360, and we're going to say units cubed. Why units cubed? Because it is a volume. So it is 360 units cubed. Okay, the next shape that we have after this is a cylinder. If you look at the surface area of a cylinder, we know that we have two circles. 1, 2. We know that the area of a circle is pi r squared. So since there are two, we have 2 pi r squared. Plus, if you open this, you're going to end up with a rectangle. Now, rectangle is length times breadth. Now, this breadth here refers to the height. So we know there's an h. But how do we get this L? The L is the circumference of the circle. If I cut this open, I'm going to end up with the circumference of the circle. And what is the circumference of a circle? 2 pi r. So we know it is 2 pi r times h. 2 pi r times h, which is the same as saying length times breadth. But you have to know that the length is 2 pi r. You have to know that the breadth is h. So the surface area is 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r h. Now let's say the radius for this is 7. What would the surface area be if the radius is 7 and the height is 12? We're going to have 2 pi, our r is 7, so we're going to have 7 squared plus 2 pi, again our r is 7 and our h is 12. Pressing that into the calculator, you'll get the surface area, which is equal to 266 pi, and then we're going to say units squared. Then the volume. Again, volume works on the same concept. Again, it works on the base times the perpendicular height. So look, what is our base? Our base is a circle, which is pi r squared. And then the height, the line that is joining the two circles, height, which is going to equal to pi, our r is 7 squared and our height is 12, which is equal to 588 pi units cubed. Why cubed? Because it is volume. The next shape we're looking at is a square-based pyramid. Now the difference between a prism and a pyramid is that a pyramid meets at one point. Now if you look at this, if I wanted the surface area, what do I have? I have a square and then I have triangle. But what you have to be careful with is these triangles don't usually come in 90 degrees, which means you have to usually calculate it, or they will tell you it is the slanted height. That is what they call it. They call it the slanted height. Now in a pyramid you're going to get the slanted height, but you're also going to get a perpendicular height that runs from the top to the center. Like if you had a tent, you'll see that there's a pole from the center right to the middle of the square. That is called your perpendicular height. But when we're doing surface area, we need the perpendicular height of the triangle, not the perpendicular height of the tent, so to speak. When we're doing the surface area of a square-based pyramid, or it doesn't matter if it's a square, remember it could also be a rectangle, but usually in grade 10, they tend to work with a square-based because they want all the triangles to be the same. You know you have 4 triangles. The area of a triangle is half base times height. So we need the area of this triangle, which is half base times height. We've got the base, but the height is the slanted height. Then we got the area of the bottom, which is length times breadth. It's a rectangle or square. if we have the following shape, now look, we need this specific measurement. They give us that this is 18. And they tell us that the center pole is 12. Now how do we calculate this dimension? We know from here to the center is going to be 9. Why? Because the entire length is 18. So it's going to be half. So if I was drawing this triangle, here's my one length going from the base to the center. And then here's my pole, which they now tell us is 12. And I've got that this is 9. How do I calculate my slanted height? When you're doing this, you are using Pythagoras. So we know that the slanted height is going to be x squared plus y squared is equal to r squared. If you are not familiar with your Pythagoras, go over your previous video where we do Pythagoras in detail. So we've got 9 squared plus 12 squared is equal to r squared. R squared is going to equal to 225. R is going to equal to 15. Now this r is our slanted height, which means it is this measurement. So if I wanted the surface area of this triangle, it's going to be a half, and my base is going to be 18, and my height is going to be 15. But all in all, how many triangles are there? There are 4 triangles. Can you see? 1, 2, 3, 4. So we got half base times height based on our triangle, and we're timesing it by 4 because I have 4 triangles. Then we're going to say plus the surface area of the square, which is length times breadth. So it's going to equal to 18 times 18. Then you simply use your calculator and get an answer for the surface area, which is equal to 864 units squared. When you are doing the surface area of a pyramid, then we know it's 4 half base times height, but remember this is specifically our slanted height. And then we got length times breadth, which is basically our base. Now the volume is an interesting one. What you would notice is when you're doing cones or pyramids, then the one thing that they have in common is the third. Why? Because you're not taking the entire volume. You're only taking a third of that volume. So it is still your base times your perpendicular height, like the others have been, isn't it? It was always length times breadth times height. The base times the perpendicular height. The base times the perpendicular height. The base times the perpendicular height. It's repeated. Base times perpendicular height. It is always the same formula. But with a pyramid or a cone, what is specific is that it is a third, then it is base times perpendicular height. So if I am doing the volume of a pyramid, then it's going to be a third. And then what is the area of my base? In this case, length times breadth, because it's a square, times what is my perpendicular height. Remember, when we're talking of the height, we are talking of the pole that's right in the center. So it would be a third, and then it would be 18 times 18, and then it would be times 12, because I'm referring to the pole that is in the center of the pyramid. So the volume is going to equal to 1296 units cubed. Okay, now let us look at a sphere and a hemisphere. Now a sphere is basically a ball, if you take a soccer ball or any round ball, and a hemisphere is when I cut that sphere in half. If we are doing the area of a sphere, you will notice the surface area is 4 pi r squared. So let us do the surface area for this sphere. The surface area is going to equal to 4 pi r squared. Now if we have that the diameter is 30, then the radius is going to equal to 15. So we have 4 pi 15 squared, which is equal to 900 pi units squared. Now a hemisphere, the surface area of a hemisphere is slightly different. The hemisphere is half of the sphere. So what I'm doing is I'm going to take 4 pi r squared, but I'm going to half it, which means I end up with 2 pi r squared. This would give me 2 pi, and my r is 15 squared, which is equal to 450 pi units. But when you cut a hemisphere, you still have this area. Now what shape is that? If you look, this is a circle. So a hemisphere has another surface area. It has the surface area of a circle, which is pi r squared, which means that besides your 4 pi r squared divided by 2, you still have to do a pi r squared, which will give me plus pi r squared, which is equal to pi, and then my r is 15 squared. So my final surface area is 675 pi units squared. Now, the easy way of doing it is you could have simply said that it is 3 pi r squared, which is equal to 675 pi units squared. So if you look, what have we done? We said that the surface area of a sphere is equal to 4 pi r squared. If we wanted a hemisphere, it is half of that, so half of 4 is 2 plus the circle on top. Do not forget the circle on top. Now let's look at the volume. The volume is 4 over 3 pi r cubed for a sphere. So we're going to say volume is equal to 4 over 3 pi. We know that r is 15. You can simply put it in your calculator, which is equal to 4,500 pi units cubed. Now if we want the volume of a hemisphere, all we have to do is take the answer and divide it by 2, because that's what they're doing, they're cutting it in half. So the volume for a hemisphere is going to equal to 2,250 pi units cubed. All I did was I took this volume and then I divided it by 2. So what I did was I said the volume of a hemisphere is equal to the volume of a sphere, and I divided it by 2, which is going to equal to Now, what you need to know is that if you calculated it, if you said 4 over 3 divided by 2, you will simply end up with 2 over 3. So you could use this formula, but sometimes to memorize so many formulas is a challenge. So it's better to learn the sphere and then half it for a hemisphere. Right, the last one we're going to do is a cone. Now the surface area of a cone, if you take the base, you can clearly see it is a circle, pi r squared. And then if you take the cone, again it is working with the slanted height, which was much like the slanted height that we had used in the pyramid. So it would be pi r times the slanted height. Right, if you look at the cone, what you would notice is again we need this length. If you look at your previous videos, it is Pythagoras, which means 12 squared plus 9 squared is going to equal to my slanted height squared, which is equal to 225, and that would give me S is equal to 15. So now we have that the slanted height is 15. What is the surface area of a cone? The surface area of a cone is pi r squared plus pi rs. Now we have that the radius is 9. So we have pi 9 squared plus pi 9, and then your slanted height you had calculated was 15. Then you can use the calculator, which is equal to 216 pi units squared. Then the volume. The volume is much like a pyramid. You'll see a third and then it's the base times the height. So we know it's a third times the base. What is the base? The base is a circle, which is pi r squared, times the height, the pole that is holding it in the center. So it would be a third pi, and then we have r, that is 9 squared, times your height, which is now 12. You can now press this in the calculator, which is equal to 324 pi units cubed, because we are doing volume. What we've done is we've created a formula page. So if you look at this page, you've got all the formulas on one page. Thank you for watching.